Rupal, you're gonna have to approve the recording in order to be
I'm
unmuted.
so sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. My name is Rupal Parekh. I'm an assistant professor at UConn School of Social Work, and I also work with UConn Tab in community engagement. Oh, my video's not showing there. My work focuses on community engagement, equity, and how systems like planning, development, health, interact with communities, sometimes in ways that align and sometimes in ways that don't. A lot of what I think about is this. How do we move from engagement that is procedural, meaning we did it because we had to engagement that actually shapes outcomes, builds trust, and improves projects? Because in many redevelopment processes, engagement technically happens, but it doesn't always influence decisions or relationships. So today, I want to focus on what it looks like to do this well, especially in the context of brownfields redevelopment, where you're balancing technical complexity, timelines, funding requirements, and community expectations. Everything I'll share is grounded in real-world TAB work, EPA expectations, and community engaged frameworks. And I'll translate this into what this looks like in practice. Next slide. So here's what we'll cover. We'll start with why CBO partnerships matter, not just conceptually, but in terms of project success, risk reduction, and EPA funding competitiveness. Then we'll briefly touch on engagement frameworks, but I'll keep it applied. We'll talk about common challenges, and I want to normalize those because they are structural more than their individual failures. Then we'll move into a step-by-step approach to building relationships with CBOs, something you can actually apply across all of your projects, hopefully. We'll also talk about tools and real-world examples. My goal here today is if you leave with at least one thing you can do differently on your next project. Next slide. Next, yeah. So I want to start with a question. You don't necessarily have to answer this, but just think about it throughout the presentation. What has been the biggest challenge when engaging communities in your redevelopment project? Some common ones we hear are, we don't know who the right organizations are. We reached out, but didn't hear back. There's mistrust or skepticism. We're already too far along in the process. So an example might be a municipality holds a public meeting late in the process, attendance is low, or the conversation is tense. That's actually not about outreach failure. It's about when and how engagement started. So I want you to just, like I said, hold this in your mind and think about your challenges as we go through this presentation. Next slide. So what are community-based organizations? They're often described as nonprofits, but that doesn't really fully capture their role. They're place-based, relationship-driven, and accountable to communities. They often serve as intermediaries between residents and institutions. And importantly, they hold trust, local knowledge, and historical context. So for example, in many communities, a local environmental justice organization may know which sites residents are most concerned about, which past redevelopment efforts created tension, and which populations are often left out. So when you work with CBOs, you're not starting from scratch. You're building an existing relationship and knowledge. Next slide. So why do CBO relationships matter? Really, this is one of the most critical points in brownfields redevelopment. Technical success, as we know, does not guarantee community acceptance. You can meet every regulatory requirement and still face delays or resistance. So let's take a real world example of what we see. often see. A site is remediated and planned for mixed-use development, but residents raise concerns late in the process about affordability, health impacts, or displacement. At that point, the project team is reacting instead of planning proactively. Now imagine that same project, but with early CBO involvement. A CBO might say early on, this community is concerned about housing displacement. How will this project address that? That allows the project team to adjust messaging, consider community benefits, and avoid conflict later. So what I'd like you to try is before your next project phase, ask, who can help us understand community concerns before they become barriers? Next slide. So collaboration, what does collaboration really look like with CBOs? Well, what we know is it's not a one size fits all. It really does exist on a spectrum. So here are some real life examples of what communities can do. So they can co-design engagement. Instead of planners deciding engagement strategies alone, a CBO helps design outreach approaches based on community realities. So there's been a shift in community from, for example, there could be like a shift in communities when you hear from CBOs from evening meetings to week-up pop-up events or local market events. And participation can increase because you listen to the CBO. Outreach participation, instead of relying on email lists or websites, CBOs can share information through trusted networks, faith groups, tenant associations, and local programs. Advisory roles. CBOs can serve as advisory board members and provide feedback on plans, messaging, and priorities. Data interpretation, I think this is a real big one. A CBO helps translate technical environmental findings into community relevant language. So for your next engagement activity, you can ask, where could a CBO meaningfully shape, not just support this process? Next slide. So several frameworks guide this work, and TAB integrates many of these principles. The asset-based community development focuses on strengths, not deficits. CBPR engages communities as partners in decision-making. Environmental justice frameworks recognize that some communities have experienced disproportionate environmental harm. And collaborative governance brings multiple stakeholders into shaping decision-making. So what these all have in common, they shift engagement from extraction to getting input, to partnership, to building together. Next slide. So let's take a look at some key principles that are really practical. Trust building. This means showing up consistently, not just when you need something. So attending a community event without presenting anything, just listening. Transparency. Being clear about what is fixed and what is flexible. So I tell folks, you can say something like, this part of the project is constrained by funding requirements, but these design elements are open for input. Shared knowledge, creating a space for community interpretation, not just presenting data. So potentially in your next meeting, explicitly saying what decisions are already made and what decisions are still open. This really can build credibility. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So I want you to think about your last project. And these are kind of questions I just want you to think about. We don't have time for people to have input. So when were community organizations brought in? Were they brought in early, which allowed for influence? Oftentimes when they're brought in late, this creates frustration, limited impact, and mistrust. So one of the most impactful shifts is really simply engaging communities earlier than feels necessary. Next slide. So we know that there are common challenges when working with communities CBOs. So let's look at a few of them and make them more actionable. We know there's limited capacity, and I mentioned this earlier. Partnering with CBOs who already have relationships and infrastructure, co-hosting meetings instead of really organizing one from scratch can really do wonders in building trust in a community. Mistrust. So working through trusted intermediaries. So having a community leader introduce your project instead of leading with a formal presentation. I often, in my community-based research, I hire somebody called a community liaison. And sometimes I hire several community liaisons that represent different communities and neighborhoods. And they really create buy-in with the community. Technical complexity. So pre-test materials with CBOs. Ask, does this material make sense? What would you change? So potentially before your next engagement effort, you can identify one challenge and one CBO that can help address it. Next slide. So some of the pillars in building relationships with CBOs is identifying your stakeholders. Identifying stakeholders really needs to be intentional and not reactive. So instead of asking, who do we need to inform? You ask, who do residents trust? Use multiple sources, local leaders, frontline staff, past engagement efforts. Tab tools like the stakeholder mapping can help structure this. Next slide. Next slide, sorry. So you want to think about who are your primary stakeholders. These are people that are directly impacted, residents, local businesses, community organizations. And secondary stakeholders include agencies, developers, advocacy groups. CBOs often bridge these groups. They represent residents, but also collaborate with institutions that make them really critical partners when you're trying to map your stakeholders. And next slide. So a stakeholder matrix can really help you prioritize engagement. So mapping stakeholders by interest and influence. So for example, a neighborhood association may have high interest, but moderate influence. So they may be important to engage early. So I'm gonna plug in, and somehow got a low battery. Or a planning department may have high influence. This may be critical for decision alignment. So using the matrix to decide who to engage early, who to partner with, and who to keep informed, it can be a really helpful tool. Next slide. Okay, so asset-based community development is another pillar. This shifts the focus from needs to assets. CBOs are often key assets. Trusted leaders, they provide trusted leaders in the community, meeting spaces, communication networks. So, I'll continue to say this, they really can help in increasing, partnering with events and increase participation and reduce effort. Next slide. So now I want you to think about, you've probably been thinking about this, and that's why you're here today. What challenges do you face with CBOs? I want you to think about whether those challenges are relationship-based, structural, or timing related. This can really help determine your approach. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about 5 stages in building meaningful relationships with CBO. So connection, it sounds simple, but it's often underestimated. Connection is not what we think of traditionally as outreach. Connection is really a relationship building before you need something. In many projects, the first time a CBO hears from a municipality or a developer is when there is a meeting or input is needed, or a deadline is approaching. That already puts the relationship in a transactional space. So what strong connection really looks like: scheduling introductory meetings before a project is fully defined, attending community events with no agenda, asking, what are your priorities right now? So in application, this could look like a town meeting, a town planning team meeting with local environmental justice organization 6 months before submitting an EPA grant. They didn't present anything. They just asked, what concerns are you hearing from residents about the site? That early connection shaped the grant narrative, identified concerns about the particular situation, may it be groundwater or health, built trust before formal engagement began. Next slide. So stakeholder mapping, and I just want to talk a little bit more about this. It's one of the biggest mistakes in engagement is treating organizations like they're isolated. They're not. They operate in networks. A neighborhood association might connect to a faith-based group, a tenant coalition, a regional advocacy organization, and often one trusted organization can connect you to many others. So a TAB aligned approach is that TAB encourages mapping not just stakeholders, but relationships between stakeholders, because influence often flows through relationships, not formal roles. So an example might be a city struggles to engage residents near a brownfield site. They kept reaching out to individuals, low response. Then they connected with one local nonprofit. That nonprofit introduced them to a youth program, a church group, a neighborhood coalition. Engagement expanded significantly, really only through one relationship. So I would like, maybe you could ask yourself, instead of asking yourself, who should we contact? Ask yourself, who connects us to other community? Who is a bridge? Next slide. So trust is not built through information. It's built really through behavior. I think we understand that. And especially in Brownfields work, many communities have experienced, as we know, broken promises, environmental harm, or lack of follow through. So there's skepticism or resistance. We know that to be true. But what really builds trust? Again, I'll say it and I'll keep saying it throughout the presentation, is sharing information early, even if it's incomplete, acknowledging uncertainty, following through on commitments. So instead of presenting a finalized redevelopment plan, a project team could bring early concepts to a CBO and say, these are still ideas. We want your input before anything is finalized. That shift is really dramatic and can really help build that trust. But what breaks trust is only showing up at formal meetings, using technical language without explanation, asking for input that doesn't influence anything. So at your next engagement moment, you could explicitly say, we are here early because your input will shape this. I mean, I've seen that, and I know that that statement alone really can change expectations. Next slide. This is where engagement becomes real. Collaboration is not gathering input, it's sharing influence. And I want to acknowledge here that this can really feel uncomfortable in structured projects, in project environments. But it doesn't mean really giving up control. It means being intentional about where community voice matters. So what collaboration looks like, and we talked a little bit about it early on, is co-hosting meetings, being on advisory groups, having CBOs represented on advisory groups, participatory workshops, residents actively shape site use, design, or priorities. In some communities, listening sessions are co-facilitated by CBOs. Of course, you could imagine this increases trust, participation, and quality of feedback. So you can pick one part of your project and ask, where can we share decision making, even in small ways? Okay, next slide. So this is also one of the most overlooked stages and one of the most important for what I would say for equity. Not all organizations, as we know, or residents have the same ability to engage with technical reports, environmental data, planning processes. So capacity building is about leveling that field. So what this looks like is explaining environmental assessments in plain language, providing those Brownfield 101 materials that we have, offering stipends or support for participation, helping CBOs interpret data. So this really aligns with the materials we have. We have simplified educational materials, community-facing explanation, tools like the SWOT analysis and listening guides that could be really helpful in capacity building. Next slide. So sustainability. So as many of you may have experienced or know, one of the most common frustrations community express are people come in for a project and then they disappear. Sustainability is about changing that pattern. So what does this look like? Continuing communication after the project ends, sharing funding opportunities, inviting CBOs periodically for different meetings and future work, recognizing contributions publicly. This goes a long way. So why this matters, strong relationships also make future projects go faster, more effective, less contentious. So a municipality can maintain relationships with the CBO after a project. When new redevelopment efforts start, there's already a trusted relationship. They already have partners, and engagement is clearly smoother. Next slide. Okay. So some communication strategies. Communication is often, even at least from what I've seen, well-intended efforts fail. You're working with technical reports, environmental data, regulatory language, but is that what communities need? No, they're looking for clarity. They're looking for relevance. They're looking for accessibility. So effective communication, like I said earlier, is plain language summaries. I know we have plenty of that at TAB. Visuals instead of dense text, short focused materials, having multiple formats, not just meetings. So TAB often helps communities translate some of this complex environmental info into accessible information. So really, instead of like a 50-page report, teams can create a one-page summary, visuals showing site changes, clear explanations of risks and next steps, and naturally engagement improves significantly. And before sharing material, ask, would someone outside of the field understand this? Okay, next slide. Next slide. Yep, there's the next slide, sorry. So partnerships don't sustain themselves, they need structure. So tools really do help clarify this. They help clarify roles, expectations, continuity. So examples include advisory boards, ensure ongoing output, not one-time feedback, MOUs, to clarify roles, responsibility, and expectations. Co-development engagement plans, ensure alignment from the beginning. And then, of course, at TAB, we have several tools like the stakeholder analysis, mapping, listening sessions, like I mentioned earlier, SWOT tools. These move engagement from informal to intentional. Okay, next slide. So I want to take a moment to pull together everything today, and I'm hoping we can get through each slide. We've covered a lot, and what I don't want is for this to feel like a set of ideas that sound good, but are really hard to apply. First, CBOs are not an add-on to your project. They are not just another stakeholder group to check off. They are often the most trusted institutions in your community. They hold relationships, history, and real insights into how projects will actually be received. So when you engage CBOs meaningfully, you're not just improving engagement, you're improving the quality and success of the project itself. Second, alignment is not a single step, it's a process. And one of the biggest shifts I hope you take away from this is engagement should start earlier than feels necessary. Because when it starts late, you're reacting to concerns. When it starts early, you're shaping outcomes. Sorry. Third, this work is not just about equity. It's about risk and effectiveness. Strong CBO partnerships reduce community resistance, improve communication, surface issues early, and lead to smoother implementation. And from a TAB and EPA perspective, this also strengthens your grant applications. Community engagement is not just encouraged, it's scored. So this is both good practice and strategic practice. Fourth, small shifts make a big difference. You don't need to completely redesign your process tomorrow, but small changes matter. So instead of presenting finalized plans, bring early ideas back to CBOs. Instead of hosting your own meeting, like I said many times, co-host with a CBO. Instead of asking for feedback, ask what matters to the community. These are really manageable shifts, but they can really change your relationship with the community and ultimately the project. All right, next slide. So I want to ground everything we've talked about in real examples, because this is where it becomes really tangible for folks. These aren't just success stories, they're examples of how engagement changes outcomes. And I'm also going to connect this with what we see in TAB communities, if I have time. So this is right here, the Dudley Street Neighborhood Project is one of the most powerful examples of community-driven redevelopment. The Dudley Street neighborhood had over 1,300 vacant contaminated parcels, many used for illegal dumping. And what made this project different is that the community didn't give up, didn't just give input, they had real control over land use. Through DSNI, residents helped define the vision, community organizations led planning, redevelopment resulted in affordable housing, parks, and community spaces. This wasn't just engagement, it was community governance. Okay, I am going to actually skip over because we only have two minutes. So if we can skip over to the last slide, this is another example. These are some resources that are on our website. Like I mentioned earlier, the stakeholder mapping tool, community engagement framework, we have listening guides, the SWOT tool. So please do reach out to us, and we do provide free technical assistance and of course tips for EPA grant applications. Next slide, I think that's our last slide. Oh, I think that's it. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate everybody being here. Please reach out to us at any time. There's the website will be, or the webinar will be on our website. Thank you again, and I appreciate your time.